My name is Elena Mercer, and I am 34 years old. If you saw me yesterday, you wouldn't think I came for money. You would see a woman with grease permanently stained under her fingernails, hair tied back in a messy bun, and the smell of motor oil clinging to her work clothes. I live in a converted garage in the industrial district, surrounded by spare parts and half-built engines. I don't live there because I have to. I live there because it is the only place where I make sense. My family is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but until last night, I didn't have health insurance, a trust fund, or even a birthday card from them in 5 years. To the world, and especially to my father, Edward Mercer, I am a mistake. I am the daughter who preferred a wrench to a wedding ring, the failure who wanted to work with her hands instead of smiling at charity luncheons. My father is a man obsessed with reputation. For Edward Mercer, the image of Mercer Industries is God. He believes that a Mercer woman should be elegant, educated in the liberal arts, and married to a senator or a banker. He hates that I do manual labor. It disgusts him physically. I remember the day I left. We were at dinner in a dining room that was too big for 3 people. I had come from the workshop, and I hadn't scrubbed the oil off my hands well enough. He looked at my hands, then at my face, his expression twisted in pure revulsion. He said, "It would be better to have no daughter at all than to have a creature like you." That was it. That was the day I stopped trying to be what he wanted. I moved out that night. They cut off my cards, my access to the accounts, everything. I was on my own. Then there is my brother, Lucas. He is the CEO now. He is everything my father wanted: polished, ruthless, handsome in a corporate way, and completely arrogant. Lucas looks at me and sees a stain on the carpet. We have a history that is worse than just sibling rivalry. He used to physically bully me when we were kids, and as adults, he just uses his power to crush me. He is terrified that I will somehow ruin the pristine image of the company he runs. He thinks my very existence is a PR nightmare. They went so far as to plant stories in the newspapers saying that I, Elena, had abandoned the Mercer name due to personal instability. They called me crazy, so they didn't have to explain why I was a mechanic. But they didn't know about the box. I kept a battered metal box that belonged to my grandfather, Thomas Mercer. He was the founder. He was the only man in that family who actually knew how a machine worked. He didn't care about stocks. He cared about torque and horsepower. He loved that I had his engineer's hands. Before he died, he gave me this box. Inside was a video message and a stack of dense legal documents. In the video, his voice was weak, but his eyes were sharp. He said, "Elena, if you are watching this, it means they have erased you. They think power is money. But power is ownership. I am not handing Mercer to an heir. I am handing it to the person who understands the machine." I didn't fully understand the weight of that box until last night. It was the night of the 50th Anniversary Gala. The event was massive. It was a celebration of 50 years of Mercer Industries' dominance in the aerospace sector. There were 600 guests in the ballroom of the Grand Hotel. These were investors, politicians, generals, and the elite of the city. I wasn't invited, obviously, but I went anyway. I wore a cheap black suit that I bought off the rack because I don't own a gown, and frankly, I wouldn't wear one if I did. I could feel the security guards watching me, whispering into their headsets, wondering if they should throw me out. I stood in the back, near the kitchen doors, hiding in the shadows. I watched my father and Lucas shaking hands. They looked like royalty, but I knew the truth. I knew secrets about their company that none of these champagne-drinking investors knew. I knew that Mercer Industries was currently producing a modified version of our core technology, the Mercer Core Drive, that was unauthorized. I knew Lucas was hiding dangerous technical faults to save money on production. I still had friends on the factory floor, the guys my family ignored. They told me about the accidents. They told me about the fires they had to put out. I had tried to warn my father. I sent anonymous emails detailing the pressure valve failures. They ignored me. They thought I was just a bitter ex-daughter trying to stir up trouble. Then, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the main stage. My father, Edward, walked up to the microphone. He looked powerful. He looked like a king addressing his subjects. He started his speech about legacy, about the future, about the integrity of the Mercer name. Then he paused. He looked out into the crowd, scanning the faces. For a split second, his eyes found me in the back of the room. He didn't flinch. He just looked colder. "I have an announcement," Edward said, his voice booming through the speakers. "Tonight, we celebrate family. But we must also be honest about who belongs in that family." The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. "I have only one child," my father declared to the 600 guests. "Lucas is the only Mercer who carries this legacy." I felt the blood drain from my face. I expected him to be cruel, but doing this publicly, erasing my existence in front of the entire city, was a new level of hatred. He continued, "There are children who are born with the spirit of this family, and there are those who choose to leave it behind." The crowd laughed nervously. It was a joke to them. It was maximum humiliation for me. On the screen behind him, a video montage began to play. It was a slideshow of the Mercer family. There were pictures of my father as a young man. There were dozens of pictures of Lucas. Lucas graduating, Lucas playing polo, Lucas cutting ribbons. There was not a single photo of me. It was as if I had never been born. I had been edited out of my own life. Lucas stood next to my father, smirking. He looked like he had won the lottery. My father had just publicly cut the dead weight. I turned to leave. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. I had enough. I was going to go back to my garage, turn on my music, and never think about these people again. But then, the side door of the stage opened. A man in a sharp gray suit walked onto the stage. It was the company's head lawyer, a man named Thomas. He was named after my grandfather, and he was one of the few people in the building who had been loyal to the founder, not the son. He didn't look happy. He looked terrified. He walked right up to my father and whispered something in his ear. My father waved him away, annoyed. "Not now, Thomas," he hissed, though the microphone picked it up. "Get off the stage." The lawyer didn't leave. He stepped up to the podium, interrupting the founder. He adjusted his glasses and looked at the crowd, then at the camera crews live-streaming the event to the financial news networks. "I apologize for the interruption," the lawyer said, his voice shaking slightly. "But a legal matter has just arisen that cannot wait." "What are you doing?" Lucas shouted from the side, stepping forward. "Security." The lawyer ignored him. He held up a document. It looked old. 30 seconds ago, Mr. Edward Mercer declared that Elena Mercer is no longer part of this family. He took a deep breath. "However," the lawyer said, his voice gaining strength, "according to the founding legal documents of this corporation, Mercer Industries operates under a specific patent agreement with the original founder, Thomas Mercer." My father looked confused. "What are you talking about?" "I own the company." "You own the brand, sir," the lawyer said. "But the patent for the Mercer Core Drive? The technology that powers 70% of your government contracts? It was placed in a specialized trust." The lawyer looked at his watch. That trust expired 10 minutes ago, coinciding with the 50th anniversary of the company's incorporation. He turned back to the crowd. Upon expiration, ownership of the patent did not transfer to Mercer Industries. It transferred to the individual named in the grandfather clause. He pointed a shaking finger toward the back of the room, toward the kitchen doors, toward me, Ms. Elena Mercer. My father froze. Lucas dropped his glass of champagne, and it shattered loudly on the stage floor. According to this document, the lawyer continued, Mercer Industries is currently manufacturing the Core Drive without a license. You are operating illegally. The crowd gasped. Murmurs started to ripple through the room like a wave. "Unless," the lawyer said, looking straight at me, "unless Ms. Elena Mercer signs the paperwork to allow it." My father's face went white. He looked at the lawyer, then he looked at me across the sea of tuxedos and gowns. "This company," the lawyer announced, looking straight at the investors who were already pulling out their phones, "is worth $400 million. But without that signature, the entire corporation creates a liability that violates federal defense statutes. We could be shut down in 72 hours. I stood there in the shadows, my cheap suit wrinkling at the elbows, and suddenly, 600 heads turned to look at me. The failure daughter, the mechanic, the mistake, was suddenly the only person in the room who mattered. The silence in the ballroom was heavy, the kind that presses against your eardrums. 600 pairs of eyes were fixed on me, the woman in the cheap suit standing by the kitchen doors. My father, Edward, looked like he had been slapped. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. It was the first time in my life I had ever seen him at a loss for words. Usually, he had a speech prepared for everything, a way to spin every situation to his advantage. But you can't spin a legal document held by your own head counsel. Lucas recovered first. He was always quick to anger, always quick to lash out when he felt cornered. He stormed across the stage toward the lawyer, Thomas. "Turn that microphone off," Lucas screamed at the sound technicians. "Cut the feed. This is a private family matter." But it was too late. The live stream was running. The investors were already pulling out their phones. I could see the panic rippling through the crowd like a wave. People were whispering, checking stock prices, and looking back and forth between the stage and me. The lawyer, Thomas, didn't back down. He was a small man, usually quiet, but he had been loyal to my grandfather, not my father. He looked at Lucas with a calm, cold expression. "This is not a family matter anymore, Lucas," Thomas said, his voice still amplified through the room. "This is a federal compliance issue. The documents are clear. The patent for the Mercer Core Drive, the technology that powers 70% of your contracts, was placed in a specialized trust by the founder, Thomas Mercer. That trust expired 10 minutes ago." He turned back to the crowd. Upon expiration, ownership of the patent did not transfer to Mercer Industries. It transferred to the individual named in the grandfather clause. He pointed at me again. "Elena Mercer." My father finally found his voice. He grabbed the microphone from the stand, his knuckles white. "This is ridiculous," he boomed, trying to use his CEO voice, the one that usually made people tremble. My father was senile when he wrote those papers. "Elena is a mechanic. She fixes transmissions. She knows nothing about this company. She has no claim here. Security. Remove her." 2 large security guards started moving toward me. I didn't move. I didn't run. I just stood there, looking straight at my father. For years, I had been afraid of him. I had been afraid of his judgment, his disappointment. But right now, watching him sweat under the stage lights, I didn't feel fear. I felt pity. "If you remove her," the lawyer interrupted, his voice cutting through my father's bluster, "you are removing the only person legally authorized to license the technology you are currently manufacturing. If she walks out that door, Mercer Industries is effectively stealing intellectual property. I will be forced to file a cease and desist order immediately. The factories will stop by morning." The guards stopped. They looked at my father for instructions. Edward was shaking. He looked at the investors, then at me. He knew the lawyer wasn't bluffing. "Everyone, please," my father stammered, his face turning a blotchy red. "There has been a misunderstanding. Please, enjoy the dessert. The band will continue. We will sort this out." He stepped off the stage and motioned frantically for Lucas. Then he pointed at me, not with the finger of a father acknowledging a daughter, but with the finger of a boss ordering a subordinate. "Bring her to the green room. Now." I could have left. I probably should have left. But I wanted to hear what they had to say. I wanted to see them beg. So, when the guards gestured for me to follow, I walked with them. I walked past the tables of people who had ignored me all night. Now, they were staring at me with a mix of curiosity and fear. I heard snippets of conversation as I passed. "Is that the daughter? I thought she was in rehab or something. Did the lawyer say she owns the patent? Sell the stock. Now." I walked into the green room, a plush, velvet-lined holding area behind the stage. It was filled with flowers and expensive catering that no one had touched. The door slammed shut behind me, blocking out the noise of the party. A moment later, the door burst open. Lucas came in first, followed by my father. Lucas didn't waste time. He lunged at me. He grabbed me by the arm and shoved me hard against the wall. You little rat, he screamed, spit flying from his mouth. You set this up. You and that traitor lawyer planned this whole thing to embarrass us. I didn't fight back physically, though I was stronger than him from years of lifting engine blocks. I just looked at him. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than I made in a year, but up close, he looked ugly. His eyes were wild. Get your hands off me, Lucas, I said calmly. I ought to kill you, he shouted, pulling back a fist. Lucas! Stop, my father barked. Lucas froze, his fist hovering in the air. He breathed heavily, glaring at me, then shoved me one last time and stepped back. He paced around the room, running his hands through his perfectly gelled hair, messing it up. My father stood by the door. He looked older than he had on stage. The power was draining out of him. He looked at me, analyzing the situation, calculating the cost. How much? My father asked. I adjusted my jacket. Excuse me? How much do you want? Edward repeated, pulling out a checkbook from his inside pocket. Clearly, this is a shakedown. You want money? Fine. You made your point. You embarrassed us. Congratulations. Now name your price. Sign the rights over to the company, and I will write you a check. You can go back to your garage. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about money. He thought everything was about money. I don't want your money, I said. Lucas laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Everyone wants money, Elena. Don't act like you're noble. We know how you live. You live in a box in the industrial district. You're telling me you don't want $5 million? $10 million. The patent isn't for sale, I said. Everything is for sale, my father shouted, losing his composure again. Do you have any idea what is at stake here? The Department of Defense contract. We are in the middle of a production run for the new guidance chips. If we stop production for even 24 hours, we are in breach of contract. They will investigate us. Do you want that? Do you want the federal government tearing apart this family's legacy? I looked at him, and I felt a cold anger rising in my chest. Legacy? I asked. You mean the legacy where you erase your own daughter? The legacy where you lie to your shareholders? We never lied, Lucas spat. We just managed the image. You don't fit the image, Elena. Look at you. I know I don't fit, I said. Grandpa knew it too. That's why he gave it to me. He knew you two would turn this company into a marketing firm. He knew you didn't care about the engineering. You only care about the stock price. I built this company, my father yelled. I took what your grandfather started and turned it into an empire. I did that. Not him. And certainly not you. You didn't build it, I said quietly. You just sold it. And right now, you're selling a lie. I took a step forward, closing the distance between me and my brother. I know about the Sector 4 recall, Lucas. The room went dead silent. Lucas stopped pacing. His face went pale. He looked at our father, then back at me. What are you talking about? He feigned ignorance, but his voice cracked. Don't play dumb, I said. I still have friends in the factory. The guys you call grease monkeys and ignore? They talked to me. They told me about the pressure valves on the Core Drive Mark IV. They told me they are failing at high temperatures. And they told me you ordered them to ship the units anyway. My father looked at Lucas. What is she talking about? Lucas started sweating. It was a minor variance, Dad. Within the margin of error. We fixed it in the software patch. You didn't fix it, I said. You masked it. You changed the sensor readings so they wouldn't trigger the alarm. But the physical defect is still there. If those drives go into military jets, people are going to die. My father's face went gray. He was a ruthless businessman, but he wasn't stupid. He knew what gross negligence meant. He knew that if what I said was true, it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about prison. Is this true? My father asked Lucas, his voice a whisper. She's lying. Lucas shouted, but he couldn't meet our father's eyes. She's just trying to scare you. She's a failure, Dad. You said it yourself. She's a loser who fixes clunkers. What does she know about aerospace engineering? I know enough to know that you are bypassing safety protocols to hit your quarterly targets, I said. And I know that 3 weeks ago, a worker named Mike Henderson lost 3 fingers because a centrifuge blew out due to that same pressure variance. You paid him off and fired him. You scrubbed the report. Lucas backed up against a table. He looked like a trapped animal. He was shocked that I knew the specific name of the victim. You have no proof, Lucas hissed. I have the grandfather's box, I said. And inside that box is not just the patent. It's the original schematics. The ones that show exactly why your modification is dangerous. Grandpa predicted this. He knew you would try to cut corners to save money. I turned to my father. So, here is the situation. You have 72 hours before the lawyer files the paperwork to shut you down for patent infringement. But honestly, that's the least of your problems. If I go to the Department of Defense with what I know about the valves, Mercer Industries won't just be shut down. You will be indicted for fraud and criminal negligence. My father collapsed into a chair. He put his head in his hands. The great Edward Mercer, the titan of industry, looked like a broken old man. He realized that his failure daughter held the power of life and death over his entire world. What do you want? My father asked again, but this time, the arrogance was gone. He sounded defeated. Do you want to destroy us? Is that it? Revenge. I'm not like you, I said. I don't care about destroying people. I care about the machines. I care that the things we build actually work. I care that we don't kill the pilots flying our gear. Then sign the papers, Lucas pleaded, his tone shifting from aggression to desperation. Just sign them, Elena. We can fix the valves. We can recall the bad units quietly. Just give us the rights. No, I said. Why not? Lucas cried. Because I don't trust you, I said. You had your chance. You've been running this place for 5 years, Lucas. And you turned it into a time bomb. The door opened again. It was the lawyer, Thomas. He looked at the three of us, the broken father, the desperate brother, and the disowned daughter. Ms. Mercer, the lawyer said to me, ignoring my father. The stock has dropped 12% in the last 15 minutes. The board of directors is calling. They want to know what is happening. They are demanding a statement. I looked at my father. You wanted a statement? You wanted to make an announcement about the family? I walked to the door. Where are you going? My father asked, panic rising in his voice again. I'm going to my garage, I said. I have work to do. You have 72 hours to figure out how to explain to the world why you don't actually own your own company. Elena, wait. Lucas shouted, running after me. You can't just leave. We need to make a deal. I turned around one last time. We don't have a deal, Lucas. You have a hostage situation. And I'm the one holding the key. I walked out of the green room and back into the ballroom. The party was effectively over. The music had stopped. People were huddled in groups, whispering frantically. As I walked through the crowd, the sea of tuxedos and gowns parted for me. They weren't looking at me with disgust anymore. They were looking at me with awe. They knew the power dynamic had shifted. I wasn't the failure anymore. I was the threat. I walked out of the hotel and into the cool night air. I loosened the collar of my stiff shirt and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, the air didn't taste like exhaust and shame. It tasted like leverage. But I knew this was just the beginning. My father and Lucas wouldn't give up that easily. They would come for me. They would try to find a loophole, or they would try to force me. I got into my beat-up truck, the engine roaring to life with a familiar rattle. I drove away from the gala, away from the glittering lights of the city center, back toward the industrial district where I lived. As I drove, my phone started buzzing. Unknown numbers. Dozens of them. Probably reporters. Probably the board. I ignored them all. I had a plan. My grandfather didn't just leave me a patent. He left me a responsibility. I couldn't just watch the company burn, but I couldn't let them keep running it into the ground either. I had to do something harder. I had to fix it. But to do that, I had to break my family first. The next morning, the sun hit the oil stains on the concrete floor of my garage, just like it did every other day. But outside, the world was burning. I had my small television turned on in the corner, usually set to a music channel, but today it was on the financial news. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen was in bright red letters. Mercer Industries stock plummets 30% amidst leadership crisis. I took a sip of my stale coffee and watched the screen. A reporter was standing outside the corporate headquarters, the building I was banned from entering. She was talking fast, her hair blowing in the wind. She said that trading had been halted twice because of the volatility. She said that rumors of a patent dispute were scaring off the big institutional investors. She also mentioned that the Department of Defense had issued a request for clarification regarding their current contracts. That was the polite government way of saying the military was about to cancel everything. My phone had been ringing nonstop for 8 hours. I had voicemails from every major news outlet in the country, 3 from my mother, who hadn't called me in 5 years, and 12 from Lucas. I deleted them all without listening. I wasn't ready to talk yet. I needed them to sweat a little longer. I needed them to understand that the power dynamic had permanently shifted. Around 10 in the morning, a black sedan pulled up to the front of my shop. It wasn't my father's limo. It was a town car. Thomas, the lawyer, stepped out. He looked exhausted. His tie was crooked, and he was carrying a thick briefcase. He looked around the garage with a mix of curiosity and discomfort, stepping carefully over a pile of discarded brake pads. "Good morning, Elena," he said. "Thomas," I replied, wiping my hands on a rag. "You look terrible." "It has been a long night," he said, placing the briefcase on my workbench. "The board of directors has been in an emergency session since you left the gala. They are panicking. They want to know what it will take to get your signature." "Did they send you to offer me money again?" I asked. "No," Thomas said. "They know money won't work. They are smart enough to realize that you hold the keys to the castle. If that patent isn't renewed in 48 hours, the government shuts us down. The company goes bankrupt in 30 days. Everyone loses everything." He opened the briefcase and pulled out a folder. "The board is willing to offer you a seat on the board and a significant yearly stipend. In exchange, you sign the rights to the Mercer Core Drive back to the company." I laughed. "A seat on the board? So I can sit in a room and listen to my father talk about his legacy while Lucas runs the engineering into the ground?" "No." Thomas sighed. "I told them you would say that. Elena, look, I knew your grandfather. I know why he did this. He wanted to protect the work. But if you let the company fail, thousands of people lose their jobs. The factory workers, the secretaries, the janitors. People who have nothing to do with your father's ego." That was the only card he could play that would work on me. I cared about the workers. I knew the guys on the floor. I knew their families. "I don't want the company to fail, Thomas," I said. "I want to save it. But I can't save it if Lucas is in charge of the machines." Just then, another car pulled up. This one was the limousine. My father and Lucas got out. They looked even worse than the lawyer. My father, Edward, looked like he had aged 10 years in one night. His skin was gray. Lucas looked frantic, his eyes darting around the garage as if he expected a paparazzi photographer to jump out from behind a tire stack. They walked into the garage. It was the first time my father had ever set foot in my workspace. He looked at the tools, the grease, the half-assembled engine block on the hoist. He wrinkled his nose. "So this is where you live," Edward said. It wasn't an insult this time. It was just a statement of defeat. "It's where I work," I said. "Something you two haven't done in a long time." Lucas stepped forward. "Okay, you made your point. We are here. We are in your shop. What do you want?" "The lawyer said you turned down the board seat. Are you crazy? That's more respect than you've ever had." "I don't want respect from people I don't respect," I said. I leaned back against the workbench. "Here is the reality. You are currently manufacturing a defective product. The pressure valves on the core drive are failing. You covered up the accident with Mike Henderson. You lied to the safety inspectors. We handled it," Lucas shouted. "You didn't handle it," I snapped. "You buried it. And now, I have the power to dig it up. If I don't sign that patent, the Department of Defense investigates. When they investigate, they will find the faulty valves. And when they find the valves, they will find the emails you sent covering it up. You go to prison, Lucas. And you, Dad, you go down for negligence." The silence in the garage was absolute. The only sound was the dripping of a leaky faucet in the corner. My father looked at me. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He realized I wasn't just the failure daughter anymore. I was the judge and the jury. "What do you want?" Edward asked quietly. "I have 3 conditions," I said. "They are non-negotiable." "Name them," the lawyer said, taking out a pen. "Number 1, I said, holding up a finger. "I want 40% of the company. Not non-voting shares. Real equity. Taken directly from your holdings, Edward, and yours, Lucas." 40%. Lucas screamed. "That's insanity. That gives you controlling interest with the public float. You're trying to steal the company." "I'm trying to own the company my grandfather left me," I corrected him. "Take it or leave it." Lucas looked at our father, waiting for him to fight back. But Edward just stared at the floor. He nodded slowly. "Continue," Edward said. "Number 2, I said. "I want the title of Chief Technical Officer. I run the engineering. I run the factories. Lucas can stay as CEO if he wants to play dress up and talk to the investors, but he is not allowed to make a single decision regarding production, safety, or design. If a machine turns on, I authorized it, not him." Lucas turned purple. "You can't be serious. You want me to answer to you?" "Yes," I said. "You're the CEO, but I'm the one who makes the product. Without me, you have nothing to sell. So yes, you answer to me." "And the 3rd condition?" my father asked. He sounded tired. He just wanted this to be over. "This is the most important one," I said. I looked directly at my father. "You care about your reputation, right? You care about the Mercer name?" "It is everything," Edward whispered. "Good," I said. "Then we're going to clean it." Condition number 3 is a public press conference. Tomorrow morning, we are going to admit that there were safety faults in the previous production run. We are going to announce a full recall of the defective units. We are going to announce the creation of a compensation fund for any worker injured in the factories, starting with Mike Henderson. "No," Lucas shouted. "That's suicide. The stock will go to 0. If we admit fault, the lawsuits will never stop." "The stock is already crashing because people think we are liars," I said. "The only way to fix it is to tell the truth. We admit the mistake, we take the hit, and we promise to do better. That is how you build a legacy, not by hiding." "We can't do that," Lucas pleaded with our father. "Dad, tell her. We can't go on TV and say we messed up. It ruins the image." Edward looked at Lucas, then he looked at me. He looked at the grease on my hands and the determination in my face. He realized something in that moment. He realized that the image he had built was fragile, but the reality I was offering, the hard, dirty work of fixing things, was strong. "She's right," Edward said. "What?" Lucas gasped. "She's right," Edward repeated, his voice stronger this time. "We built this company on engineering, not marketing. Your grandfather, he would have done the same thing. He would have fixed the machine." Edward walked over to me. He didn't hug me. We weren't that kind of family. But he stood in front of me and looked me in the eye. "You win, Elena," he said. "You get the 40%. You get the job. And we will do the press conference." "Dad," Lucas yelled. "Shut up, Lucas." Edward snapped. "It's over. Elena is the only reason we still have a company to argue about." The lawyer finished writing on his notepad. "I will have the papers drawn up within the hour. The transfer of stock, the employment contract, and the press release. We can hold the conference tomorrow at 9 a.m. in the main lobby." "One more thing," I said. They all looked at me, bracing for another demand. "The new factory wing," I said. "The one you are building next month. It gets named the Thomas Mercer Engineering Center. After Grandpa." My father nodded. A faint smile touched his lips, the first real smile I had seen in years. "Yes, that is appropriate." They left my garage in silence. Lucas looked like he was about to vomit, but he got in the car. My father paused at the door of the limo and looked back at me one last time. He didn't say he was proud of me. He didn't apologize for disowning me. But he nodded, a gesture of respect from one boss to another. I stood there in the quiet of my shop. I had won. I had the money, the power, and the control. But the hardest part was coming tomorrow. I had to stand in front of the world and admit that my family had failed. I had to take the shame onto my own shoulders to save the future. I walked over to the grandfather's metal box on my shelf. I touched the cold steel. "I got it back, Grandpa," I whispered. "Now I'm going to fix it." The next 24 hours were a blur of lawyers, signatures, and briefings. I didn't sleep. I spent the night at the factory, walking the floor, checking the schematics, and talking to the shift managers. They were shocked to see me, the failure daughter, giving orders. But when I started pointing out the specific calibration errors in the assembly line, their shock turned to relief. They finally had a boss who knew what a torque wrench was. By the time the sun came up, I was exhausted, but I was ready. I traded my grease-stained jumpsuit for the best suit I owned, which was still the cheap one from the gala, but I didn't care. I wasn't there to look like a model. I was there to look like a mechanic who had just taken over the boardroom. I drove my truck to the headquarters. The parking lot was full of news vans. Cameras were everywhere. I walked through the front doors, the security guards who used to kick me out now holding the door open for me. I met my father and Lucas in the hallway behind the atrium. Lucas wouldn't look at me. He was staring at his phone, probably watching his net worth fluctuate. My father was pacing. "Are you ready?" Edward asked me. "Are you?" I replied. "I have the statement," Edward said, patting his pocket. "I will introduce you. Then you take the lead." "Just tell the truth," I said. "That's all you have to do." We walked out onto the podium. The flashbulbs were blinding. Hundreds of reporters were shouting questions. "Mr. Mercer, is the company bankrupt? Ms. Mercer, is it true you own the patent? Are the rumors about the investigation true?" My father stepped up to the microphone. He raised his hand, and the room went quiet. He looked old and tired, but he stood tall. "Ladies and gentlemen," Edward began. "For 50 years, Mercer Industries has been a symbol of excellence. But recently, we lost our way. We prioritized profit over precision. We prioritized image over integrity." He paused. The crowd was stunned. CEOs didn't talk like this. "I made a mistake," Edward continued. "I tried to build a legacy based on a name. But a name means nothing without the work to back it up. 2 days ago, I said I had only one child. I was wrong." He turned and gestured to me. "I would like to introduce you to the new Chief Technical Officer and majority shareholder of Mercer Industries," my father said. "My daughter, Elena Mercer. She is the only one who can fix what we have broken." I stepped up to the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces. I looked at the camera lenses that were broadcasting this to the world. I took a deep breath. I didn't have a prepared speech. I didn't need one. "My name is Elena," I said into the microphone. "And we have a lot of work to do." The flashbulbs were blinding, popping like tiny explosions in my face. I stood at the podium, gripping the sides of the wood so hard my knuckles turned white. My father, Edward, had just stepped back, leaving me alone with the world watching. I looked at the reporters, then at the camera lenses that looked like black eyes staring right into my soul. I wasn't a public speaker. I didn't know how to use corporate speak, or how to spin a disaster into a win. I only knew how to fix broken things. And right now, Mercer Industries was the most broken thing I had ever seen. "You want to know what happened?" I said, my voice echoing in the large lobby. "You want to know why the stock dropped, and why the lawyers are here? The answer is simple. We forgot what we were building." I looked over at Lucas. He was standing in the wings, his arms crossed, looking at the floor. He looked small. "For the last 5 years," I continued, "this company has been obsessed with quarterly targets. We cut corners to make the numbers look good. We modified the Mercer Core Drive, the engine that powers our military defense contracts, to save 12% on production costs. In doing so, we introduced a thermal variance in the pressure valves." A gasp went through the room. Admitting a specific technical fault on live television was suicide in the corporate world. Usually you say anomalies or irregularities. You never admit you built a bad part. "That variance caused a failure in the centrifuge 3 weeks ago," I said, not backing down. A man named Mike Henderson was injured. We fire him to keep him quiet. That ends today. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. It was the list of demands I had written in my garage with a Sharpie. Effective immediately, Mercer Industries is issuing a voluntary recall of all Mark IV core drives. Production is halted until the original safety protocols from the founding patent, my grandfather's patent, are reinstated. We are also establishing a $10 million compensation fund for any employee injured due to safety negligence, starting with full restitution and a job offer for Mr. Henderson. The reporters started shouting questions all at once. Ms. Mercer, will this bankrupt the company? Are you taking over as CEO? What does your father think about this? I leaned into the mic. My father and my brother are good at selling things. But from now on, I am the one deciding what we sell. If it has the Mercer name on it, I have personally inspected it. If it isn't perfect, it doesn't leave the factory. That is the new policy. Thank you. I walked off the stage. I didn't wait for applause, and there wasn't any. There was just a stunned silence followed by the chaotic roar of people talking on their phones. I walked past my father. He looked pale, but he gave me a curt nod. He knew I had just cost him a fortune in the short term, but I had saved the company from prison in the long term. Lucas was waiting for me in the hallway. He looked furious. You just tanked the stock, Lucas hissed, walking beside me as we headed toward the elevators. It's down another 15%. The shareholders are going to sue us for mismanagement. Let them sue, I said, pressing the button for the top floor. Better a lawsuit than a federal indictment for fraud. Besides, the stock will bounce back once they realize we aren't lying to them anymore. We got into the elevator. It was just me and Lucas. The doors closed, trapping us in the golden box. You think you've won, don't you? Lucas asked, his voice trembling. You think because you have the patent you own me. I don't want to own you, Lucas, I said, looking at the numbers counting up. I just want you to get out of my way. You can keep the title of CEO. You can go to the luncheons and the charity balls. You can wear the tuxedo. I don't care about that. But from now on, the engineering department answers to me. The factory floor answers to me. You don't sign a single work order without my initials on it. The elevator dinged at the executive floor. I walked out and headed straight for the corner office, the one that used to be my father's, but was now Lucas's. I didn't ask permission. I walked in, grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the desk, and moved it to the side. Then I threw my grease-stained messenger bag onto the mahogany surface. Get me the schematics for the assembly line, I ordered. Lucas stood in the doorway, blinking. What? You heard me, I said, sitting down in the leather chair that cost more than my truck. I need the blueprints for the Sector 4 assembly line, and I need the personnel files for the floor managers. I'm firing the guy who authorized the cover-up. Lucas stood there for a moment, his face turning red. He wasn't used to taking orders, especially not from the sister he had called a failure for 10 years. But then he remembered the lawyer and the patent and the fact that I could shut down the entire company with a single phone call. He turned around and walked out to his assistant. Get her the files, I heard him say quietly. For the next 3 months, I lived at the headquarters. I didn't sleep in the penthouse. I slept on a cot I set up in the engineering lab. I brought my own tools from the garage because I didn't like the shiny and used ones they had in the R&D department. I walked the factory floor every day at 6 a.m. At first, the workers were suspicious. They saw me as just another Mercer, another rich kid coming to play boss. But then they saw me under the machines. They saw me arguing with the suppliers about steel quality. They saw me fire the abusive middle managers who had made their lives miserable. And most importantly, they saw me bring Mike Henderson back. I drove to Mike's house myself. He was missing 3 fingers on his left hand. He looked at me with hatred when I knocked on his door. But when I handed him the check and the apology letter and told him he had his job back as a safety inspector, with a raise, he broke down crying. He shook my hand with his good hand. That was the moment the tide turned. The workers started to trust me. The suits on the top floor were a different story. They hated me. I disrupted their lunch breaks. I canceled their golf outings to hold emergency safety meetings. I forced them to read technical manuals. But they couldn't touch me. I owned 40% of the company, and I was the only person on Earth legally allowed to authorize the production of the Core Drive. Lucas tried to fight back in small ways. He tried to hide emails from me. He tried to schedule board meetings when he thought I would be busy on the factory floor. But every time he tried to maneuver, I shut him down. One afternoon, about 6 months after the gala, we were in a board meeting. The room was full of investors who were still nervous about the stock price, which had stabilized but was still lower than its peak. "We need to increase output," Lucas was saying, pointing to a graph. "If we run the lines at 110% capacity, we can make up the losses by Q4. "No," I said from the other end of the table. I wasn't wearing a suit. I was wearing a polo shirt and work boots. Lucas sighed, an exaggerated, theatrical sound. "Elena, please. We have gone over this. The machines can handle it." "The machines can handle it, but the cooling systems can't," I said, sliding a folder down the table. "I ran the stress tests last night. If you push past 100%, the heat variance returns. We stay at 95%. But the investors want growth." Lucas argued, slamming his hand on the table. "The investors want a product that doesn't explode," I said calmly. "We stay at 95%. I looked around the table at the board members. "Does anyone else have a problem with prioritizing safety?" No one said a word. They looked at Lucas, then they looked at me. They saw the difference. Lucas was fighting for a bonus. I was fighting for the reality of the machine. One by one, they nodded at me. Lucas sat down, defeated. He realized then that he had lost the room. He had lost the company. He was just a figurehead, a puppet wearing a tie, while I pulled the strings. My father, Edward, stopped coming to the office. He officially retired a month after the press conference. He spent his time at his country club, telling anyone who would listen that his daughter was a genius engineer. It was funny how quickly the narrative changed. I went from being the failure daughter to the prodigy as soon as I made them money again. I didn't care about his praise any more than I cared about his insults. I knew who he was. One evening, late, I was the only one left in the building. I was in the main lobby, looking at the portrait of my grandfather, Thomas Mercer. It hung above the reception desk. He looked stern, with grease under his fingernails, just like me. I heard footsteps behind me. It was Lucas. He was leaving for the night, carrying his briefcase.
He stopped when he saw me.
"You happy?"
Lucas asked.
He sounded tired. The arrogance had been ground out of him over the last half year. "The unexpected failure rate is down to 0, I said. "Production is steady. The DoD contract was renewed yesterday." "Yeah, I'm happy." Lucas let out a short, bitter laugh. "You know, Dad talks about you like you're the second coming of Christ now. He doesn't even mention my name." "He respects success, Lucas," I said. "That's all he ever cared about. It's not love. Don't confuse it with love." Lucas looked at me, surprised. He expected me to gloat. He expected me to rub it in his face. "I hated you," Lucas admitted. "I hated that you could just walk away. I had to stay. I had to be what he wanted. I had to be the perfect son. And now I work for you." "You don't work for me," I said. "You work for the machine. We all do." That's what Grandpa tried to teach Dad, but he never listened. You can't cheat physics, Lucas. You can't negotiate with gravity. You just have to do the work. I turned back to the portrait. "I'm going to head back to the shop," I said. "I have an idea for the Mark V drive. I need to sketch it out." "You're going to the garage?" Lucas asked. "You have a penthouse office." "The light is better in the garage," I said. I walked out of the glass doors of Mercer Industries, leaving my brother standing in the lobby of the empire he technically ran but didn't control. I got into my old truck. It still rattled when I started it. I hadn't fixed it yet because I had been too busy fixing everything else. As I drove away, I thought about the video my grandfather left me. He had been right. He knew that the only way to save the legacy was to let it almost die. He knew that my father and brother thought Mercer was about blood, about the DNA, the name, the social standing. But Grandpa knew the truth. Mercer wasn't blood. It was hands. It was the ability to touch something broken and make it whole. It was the grease and the sweat and the hours spent in the dark when no one was watching. They had tried to erase me because I didn't look the part. They had disowned me because I was a failure. But in the end, they all had to bow down to the one thing they couldn't buy, couldn't fake, and couldn't steal. They had to bow down to the work. And I was the only one willing to do it. It has been 5 years since the night I walked out of the shadows and took back my name. I am standing on the observation deck of the newly completed Thomas Mercer Engineering Center. It is a massive glass and steel structure attached to the main factory, just like I demanded in my list of conditions. Down below, on the production floor, 300 technicians are working on the prototype for the Mercer Clean Energy Turbine. We don't just make military gears anymore. We build the engines that power cities. The company stock is trading at an all-time high. It took 2 years to rebuild the trust we lost, but we did it. We did it by never shipping a single defective part. We did it by paying Mike Henderson and every other injured worker what they deserved. We did it the hard way. The door behind me opens. I don't turn around. I know the footsteps. It's Lucas. The press is ready, Elena, Lucas says. I turn to look at him. My brother looks different now. The arrogance that used to define his face is gone, replaced by a kind of weary respect. He is still the CEO. He still wears the expensive Italian suits and charms the investors at lunch. But he knows, and I know, that his role is different now. He is the mouth of the company. I am the heart. Did you read the technical specs I sent you? I ask. Yes, Lucas nods, holding up a tablet. I memorized the efficiency ratings. I won't overpromise this time. Good, I say. We walk together toward the elevator. It is strange how life works. 5 years ago, he wanted to crush me because I embarrassed him. Now, he won't make a major decision without checking with me first. He learned the hard lesson. You can't spin your way out of physics. Dad is here, Lucas mentions quietly as the elevator descends. I saw his car, I reply. Edward Mercer is 80 years old now. He doesn't come to the office much. He spends his time in his garden. The fight went out of him the day I took over. He realized that the failure daughter was the only one who actually inherited his father's talent. We don't talk much, but when we do, it's civil. He watches me with a look that isn't quite pride, but it isn't disappointment anymore. It's something like awe. He looks at me like I'm a machine he doesn't quite understand, but he knows he needs. We walk out into the lobby, the same lobby where I forced them to tell the truth 5 years ago. The portrait of my grandfather is still there, but now there is a second portrait next to it. It's a picture of the factory floor, dirty and chaotic, filled with workers in grease-stained jumpsuits. I insisted on it. I adjust my cuffs. I'm wearing a tailored suit today, but under the jacket on my wrist I'm wearing a scratched, cheap watch that I used to wear in the garage. It reminds me of who I am. Ready? Lucas asks, his hand hovering over the door handle. He is waiting for my signal. I look at my reflection in the glass. I don't see a billionaire heiress. I don't see a socialite. I see a mechanic who just happens to own an empire. Let's go to work, I say. Lucas opens the door, and we walk out into the flashing lights together. He steps to the microphone to do the talking. I step to the side, crossing my arms, watching the machines run. I am Elena Mercer. I was disowned. I was erased. I was the failure. But in the end, none of that mattered. Because while they were busy building a reputation, I was busy building the future. They thought the Mercer legacy was about blood. My grandfather knew it was about hands. And the future belongs to the people who get their hands dirty.